Oh, thank you everyone for joining. It's great to see people filtering in. We're excited to be sharing a bit about this really pretty amazing story from the city of Cologne. And I think Thomas, you're going to pull up the.
Yeah.
We can show you some visuals. But while we're doing that, let me just do some introductions. So Thomas Hohenacher is the founder and CEO of Cleverciti. Founded the company 9 years ago, and really very focused from the start on smart cities and really helping cities to reduce congestion, emissions, and grow revenue of local businesses and parking revenues for the city. And I'm David Parker, the COO of Cleverciti, and I joined the company a couple of years ago, really inspired by that mission to help cities to reduce emissions and really solve climate change. And so we're doing our little part to make that happen. And we've been working with many cities around the world, but today we wanted to share the story of the city of Cologne. Before we get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the challenge is that cities face. And if you think about sort of the last mile of a trip in a lot of contexts, despite us using kilometers here for the most part in Europe, we still talk about this term vehicle miles traveled and reducing the distance that people travel, the amount of miles they spend in their car. But one of the things we've realized is that really that last mile, the part where you're about to arrive, is the time where you spend really the most time, the most minutes in your car, and reducing that amount to the bare minimum can make a huge impact in both in the total length of the trip and also the total emissions of the trip and the impact in the city, because that last mile is frequently right downtown where it's very congested and busy, and we just want to get the cars off the street and parked as fast as possible. And so when we think about how do you reduce VMT, or vehicle minutes traveled, there's lots of different ways to do that. So you can deploy public transport, you can do congestion pricing, mobility hubs, parking guidance. But what we've found is that many of these areas are they're either lower impact or they're massive investments, like public transport. Expanding a subway line can take 10 years and hundreds of millions of euros to execute. And so what we've found with the cities that we partner with is that actually parking guidance is the most effective way to reduce the amount of time people are spending in their cars, which of course translates then to emissions and congestion and all these other great benefits for the city. And so we think about parking search, and just to sort of frame up the scale. So first of all, saving time, there's 7 billion hours that are wasted every year across the US, UK, and Germany just looking for a parking space. And during that wasted time, there's 28 million metric tons of CO2 being emitted, which would require over 1 billion trees to be planted if you wanted to offset that with trees, which is a little impractical. Of course, there's also this enormous financial cost, both in the extra petrol or electricity that's been purchased to fuel the car, but also the time that's wasted and what that time could be better used for, like shopping in a local boutique or going to a restaurant. If hopefully someday we're allowed to do that again after COVID. And then really if you think about all of the total traffic in a city, about 30% of that traffic in the inner city is the result of circling around looking for a space. And so all this unnecessary traffic, we want to eliminate that. And so we developed this solution, which we'll really tell you about in a minute, around Cologne, that uses sensors overhead to accurately and in real time detect parking occupancy, and then local digital guidance with innovative cloud-connected displays that really let you push the right message to the driver at every turn. And that's really important for 100% adoption so that everyone can see where to go. And then also app navigation, which is helpful for use cases like deciding before you leave your house which path to take. And then, of course, being able to make that data open and available so that it can be leveraged for all sorts of other interesting use cases, and the city can learn about their parking environment. So let's talk about how that really works in Cologne and what the impact is. And Cologne, as many of you know, one of the largest cities in Germany and very well known. Also, as a result, very hard to find a parking space. And so Thomas is going to tell you a little bit about what the goals of the city were, and then how they addressed them, and then we'll sort of close it out with what the results were.
So yes, thank you, David. So the goal of the city was obviously to replace this old medieval system called luck to find a parking space by something much more powerful and by distributing the data. And what were the main goals of the city? So obviously to find a parking space fast, which means reducing emission and what David said, the minutes traveled, and also reducing the stress of the driver, because that can lead to accidents and all sorts of other issues, and therefore reducing that enormous amount of parking search traffic in the cities. And at the same time, that also means that we can reduce the noise for the residents and make their quality of life much better. And of course, what it also leads to, that the higher amount of service in connection with parking, so all of a sudden parking being data driven and not driven by just luck anymore, increases also the parking revenue, because people do understand that if they get a great service, it also, is completely normal to pay for that service. So how did the city in Cologne do that? We worked together with a local utility, because the local utility owned the lampposts in the city, or in many cities they service the lampposts, and therefore the 60 signage was deployed at every lamppost at sort of strategic intersections, and the sign blends perfectly into the city landscape and is visible from 360 degrees. And as you can see here, when you approach the intersection, you can already see that if you would drive left, you would have 2 parking spaces. If you would drive straight ahead, you would have only 1. And if you drive to the right, you would have actually 8, or sometimes it's 0. So you get an immediate overview of the situation. So unnecessary circling around in one-way street or in residential streets is not necessary anymore, because you do get guided directly to the area and to the spaces where they are, where you can park. And we could actually show that reduced the time amount to travel by 45%. So it's a dramatic change how to find parking and how to direct traffic in a city. This gives you sort of an overview of what was installed. This part of the city is a very, very busy downtown district, lots of shops and retailers. So for the retailers, it's of course essential to have a lot of turnover, especially in these times now. They want as many visitors as possible. And in order to be able to compete against the Amazons and the onlines, they need to make that shopping experience really in a seamless and very easy way. So there we're covering 770 parking spaces. Most of them don't have any bays. So the system perfectly detects a car in any environment, even without markings of the space. And then, of course, there is also an app, digital guidance. Usually we recommend to integrate the digital guidance into the city application, into the city app, but sometimes it's a standalone app, and it guides you directly to the nearest space to the store or wherever you want to go. It also calculates the distance that you need to walk from that parking space, and it chooses a space with the closest distance. But it also tells you, don't bother to go in the inner city because there's nothing available, and it recommends immediately a different area. And you can, with a click of a button, you can also do mobile payment. So I just want to show you that in a live application, what that actually looks like. So I just have to briefly stop screen sharing and start from scratch in a different window and go to this one here. Let's see. Here you, for instance, see the circs. You see how the guidance is here, and you can click on a circ, and you immediately get the feedback from that circ live, from that guidance, and you see everything this guidance sign shows. And you can actually even choose on the fly a different signage if you want. I mean, here are just some examples like wear a mask or something like that. So the city can, use that as a communication tool, not only for parking, but for anything that is important or essential in the city. So I guess now I have to stop once more to go to a different application, and I'll go to a different Chrome tab, and I show you this here. So this is, for instance, a parking area here, and you can see, the arrival time. You can see how long people are staying. You can see all sorts of statistics. And I don't know whether the window now switches to this statistic. I have to take a look, but maybe not. No, it's still on the old statistic, so I have to stop again and show you a new statistic. And because I wanted to show you that we can also look back, for instance, for a day or as long as we like. And there we then also see the occupancy rate during the day, and we can also watch the payment rate. So the city really has the complete management tools to really, watch the payment rate and take maybe necessary measures. Here, the payment rate dropped to 33%, so that would be a good moment to have a look. But in other times, it's at 66%. So that cockpit and that correlation with payment rate gives you complete control over your parking, and you can decide to increase the hourly rate or decrease it or take any other measures. So I'm going to go back to our presentation now, since I gave you a little excursion into the live environment. And obviously the outcome was very, very positive. We could really reduce this parking search time by 45%, because now obviously you can see both digitally and also locally where to go. And 66% of previous unused spaces could actually be filled. So it's a great success for the city. It's a great path to move forward in a smart city, to reduce congestion, reduce the traffic in the inner city, and at the same time encourage and enhance local retail, which is very important in these hopefully soon post-COVID times. David, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. And maybe you could switch. Yeah, perfect. So if we sort of reflect back on Cologne and then extend that to what does that mean for like the typical city? And so if you think about an urban center with 3,000 spaces, and it can take 15, many times even 20 minutes to find a parking space. What does that translate into in terms of revenues and also the time that you're wasting searching for a space? And it's amazing when you really add it all up. So in this one little environment, it would be 790 times driven around the world, just in people looking for parking spaces in that little area of 3,000 spaces. And most cities have kind of a 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 space urban core. And so if you wanted to do something about that, what would you do? Well, you could plant 250,000 trees, or you could deploy a solution like this and not just benefit the world in terms of offsetting all the emissions, but also save enormous amount of time for the drivers and then support the local businesses. And so if you take all that time that was otherwise spent driving in circles and instead apply it to shopping at a local boutique or a restaurant, it could be 100 million euro of additional revenue for those local businesses. And of course, if you then, through delivering amazing service to the drivers, what we find is that the payment rate ends up increasing, and so the city ends up realizing significant additional revenues directly as well, which of course help to fund the deployment. And so if we try to extend this to some lessons learned, and what are kind of the best practices as you as a city are working to deploy a solution to solve some of these challenges. So first of all, we found time and again, parking guidance is the fastest way to reduce the amount of time people are spending in their vehicle. And but in order to do that effectively, we've realized that you can't just cover garages, which many European cities do. You also need to include all of the public parking. And so the surface lots and also the on-street areas are really important, because if I know there's a space in a garage, I'm still going to try my luck and drive around the street a few times to see if I can find a space on my own. So you really have to have that comprehensive view. And then local guidance is really important. So not just in an app, we're not supposed to be using our phones while we're driving. Having the digital signage there in front of the driver is really crucial. And then another thing we found is that local retailers really benefit from this. So, imagining the amount of time that these people can now spend shopping in a local boutique, involving them as stakeholders is really crucial. So there's some projects we've done in the US recently where they actually were initiated by the local retailers. They said, we have a huge problem, we need to solve it. And so including them as a stakeholder is really a great idea. And then in terms of, how do you benefit the residents? It's really about providing them with service. So we're reducing the noise, the pollution, the traffic. We're also, when they're looking for a parking space, we're helping them find a space as well. And then lastly, the idea really is, you need to find a way to fund a solution like this. And one of the great ways to do that is to tie that to the increase in parking revenues. So there's higher turnover from the spaces, there's more service, so people are paying, and through the monitoring, you can also help to better do compliance or enforcement activities. And so that positive ROI really provides a funding source to then have this really positive impact, not just on the traffic congestion, but also on the climate, the world, and the quality of life that the citizens of the city have. So that's the overview, and it looks like we have some questions coming in. So we will please. I think we have 5 minutes for questions. So if you have any more, please drop them into the chat. And it looks like the first question is from Dirk, and says, is the service you provide plug and play inside of a city anywhere in the world, or does it take or need an enabling and attractive laws, regulations, and policy? It's a great question, and we've actually worked really hard over the years to make this plug and play. And it was not easy at first, but now that we've been at this for 8 or 9 years, we've found that the key thing is being able to mount it on existing infrastructure. So in the case of Cologne, we worked directly with the utility, and the utility owns the lampposts and was able to just very quickly, they actually did the installation themselves using tools that we provided them, and they're able to mount the sensors and connect them to the existing power, and just everything runs very seamlessly. And we found that approach works in many countries around the world. As I said, we've done this in over 20 countries around the world now, and so we've run into a lot of different challenges and questions, and we've now been able to address those.
We also found, for instance, in Germany, that still a lot of cities don't have 24/7 power on their lampposts. This will be gradually coming because you need more smart devices like 5G and other things, but still a lot of cities don't have, individual power. And so we are providing all our devices also with batteries that charge at night. So it's very, very fast to deploy, and that even includes the LED displays, the round 360-degree displays that you've seen. So everything can be also battery powered and charged at night.
That's great. So I think we've used up all the questions, and of course we're available throughout the day. So if there's any other questions, we have there's a booth for Cleverciti in the expo area. We have a couple people on there who are able to engage with you and talk about specific questions you may have. And of course, you can reach out to me or Thomas at any time. Our email addresses were in that last slide that you can grab from the recording, and you can also, of course, contact us through the Hopin platform.